I'm sure he doesn't need introduction, but can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Noel Daniel. I am the co-founder and managing partner of Kudu Ventures.
Yeah, just tell me a little bit more about what you're doing.
So Kudu Ventures is a venture capital firm that invests in early stage tech startups. It's mostly tech focused, not necessarily tech startups only, but we're looking for breakthrough ideas that can make a difference in Ethiopia.
And then how did you get here? How did you come to this section or to this area of work?
So when I was, I think, in my freshman or sophomore year in college, I started an organization called Network to Net Worth, which is pretty similar to Mella. So what we're doing, we're inviting high net worth individuals, successful business people, artists, and from all different sectors to come and share with the youth. So the idea was to kind of build a bridge between the youth and the older generation, which is usually pretty hard to get to. So we started like that, and while we're doing Network to Net Worth, a lot of people started reaching out to us and saying, hey, I have this great idea after hearing our speakers share their experiences. And then what started happening is we started connecting people on a case-by-case basis. So you'd come to one of our events, see our panelists share, and then they'd reach out probably a week later saying, hey, I have this great idea. But I was trying to reach out to that person, but I couldn't. They wouldn't respond or whatever the case was. So we would make a few connections and connect people to people with ideas or people with funding. But then the idea was to have a more efficient system of raising funds and being able to inject in early stage startups in a more efficient way. So then I remember one night in New York, I met my investor over dinner. We spoke a lot about what we have in plans, what our vision is, and as well as our missions, and it kind of aligned. So I was telling him that my idea was to raise money, move back to Ethiopia, and try to invest in early stage tech startups that have a lot of potential. So he agreed as well. Just to say a little bit about my investor, he's a 9th grade dropout. He lives in Atlanta, very, very successful real estate investor. So he kind of understands, being young and having go through a lot of struggle, especially back then. Now we have it much easier. So we kind of clicked on the idea of, Ethiopia right now is in dire need of innovation and technology in order to expand the economy and make sure we have a competitive advantage, to other countries, especially in the tech field.
And then while you were working on this, what were some of the challenges you faced and how did you work on them?
As you guys all know, there's a lot of challenges here, starting from bureaucracy. So I think one of the interesting challenges that we had initially coming here, so we said, let's start a venture capital firm. We came out here, we tried to register as a venture capital firm, and the first problem we ran into is there is no law for venture capital. So there's no legal framework, no infrastructure, no nothing. So actually just about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they announced that they'll be working on a venture capital policy, which makes us very happy. It should make all the startups happy as well. Finally, as you guys all know, venture capital is the most important thing to a startup to grow and expand. Venture capitalists are the only ones that take a chance on early stage startups and ideas. So, there not being a policy for us was really a challenge at first. But the government is really open to collaborating, to working together, listening to suggestions that we have. Having lived abroad, I used to live in New York. So I was involved in the whole finance sector. And for us, what we want to do is bring knowledge back and make sure that Ethiopia can implement policies that can help startups grow and expand to the level to be able to compete with global companies.
I think that deserves a round of applause, no? They started making policies. And then while you were trying to set this up, or while you are setting this up, what are the things that you consider as good assets to have? What helps you build this team, build this network, build all of it?
I think, just one of the things I want to mention out is initially when we started network to net worth, a lot of people, just so one thing you guys know, people will always be negative. People always, there's a lot of naysayers. So a lot of people are saying, what's the point of network to net worth? You already have a decent network. So why don't you just keep working on your own? So that's one mentality we need to stop. I think collaboration is the most important thing. So I think being able to collaborate with other stakeholders in the field is extremely important. We need to make sure we put our resources together. There's a lot of things that we can achieve by working together. So I think the biggest challenge, here is that people need to be able to collectively work together. I usually see a scarcity mindset here in Ethiopia, and I don't blame it because of the history that we've had. A lot of times, it starts from like driving. People don't even want to give you the road because they think, I don't know where they think the road is going to go. Everyone has such a bad attitude. Everyone's cutting everybody off. So I think we need to be more collaborative, for sure, in order to have a more efficient economy. But yeah, I think that is the most important thing. People here don't, as far as we've been here, we've had a big issue with collaborating with other companies.
That's a really good point. And tell me a little bit more about the projects you're working on right now. What exactly are you involved in?
So for us, we've been here since March. So it took us about, just one of the things to also mention is you need to look at Ethiopia. One of my mentors always says this, is that the glass is half full rather than saying half empty. You guys probably know this quote's from Zamadena, but the whole idea is when you come to a place like Ethiopia, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of problems, but there's also a lot of opportunities. So for us, one of the first things that we did after getting our business license, which took us about a month, in the US it takes 15 minutes from home. You do it online, they send you the envelope with all your information. So I guess that's one of the things we need to work on. But as in our first project now, our first investment is actually with ICOG Labs. So Bethlehem is sitting over there, So what we're doing with them is currently a SolveIT IT innovation competition is happening across 15 countries. So the idea is to decentralize the whole idea of technologies only concentrated in Addis. So this competition is in 15 cities, Makale, Aksum, all these, Awasa, all these different spots. And the idea is getting the brightest people from all of these cities that are coming up with local solutions to local problems. So we just partnered up with SolveIT and ICOG, and the idea is to start an accelerator, which is going to be producing about 18 startups a year. I'm not really sure if there's another accelerator doing that right now, but it's a really ambitious project. In 2 years, it's about 36 startups that are going to be starting from scratch. Most of them only came with an idea. I think maybe only if you had an MVP. So we're investing in that project to create 36 startups from scratch, help them, support them, mentoring with their product, MVP. So ICOG Labs in Bethlehem will be running it. We'll be financing it. And now we're looking to a very prosperous project. So we're excited to see what these startups are going to be doing.
So basically what you're doing is investing into the future of these people and what they're doing in their projects, right? Is there anything specific that you see happening within the 5 years, 10 years? What do you see in the future?
Is this for me or the country
Both.
in general?
Let's do both.
I think, Ethiopia is in a pretty good position right now. One of the things by the way, this is my partner Anthony right here in the front with the hat. We were just in Israel, a month ago. And one of the interesting things that he said that really stuck with me was Israel has a population of, how many was it? 7 million, right? So Israel has a population of 7 million people. And one of the things Anthony was saying was that we have over 100 million people. So for us as a venture capital firm, when we look at people coming with ideas, there's 3 things. Number 1, the team, the product, and the market size, right? So team is, what are the founders, what makes the founders special to tackle a certain issue? Because if it's a good idea, most probably we're going to have more people coming to the business, more competition. So the idea is we have to make sure the team has the skills required in order to succeed. And number two is the product. It has to be a good enough product. You know, I remember one of my mentors said to me, when you come up with ideas, try to come up with aspirin ideas and not with vitamin ideas. So basically what that means is if you forget your vitamin at home and you leave, you're not going to turn around back to get your vitamins. But if you have a headache and you're on the way to work and you forget your aspirin, you're definitely going to go back to get it. So try to come up with ideas that actually make a difference, that actually make a huge impact and change the way we do things drastically. And so I think those are like the really important things that we're trying to focus on. But to go back to the point of Israel, well, when Israel has 7 million, you said? 7 million people. Even if you attract 10% of that for your product, that's like almost like zero, you know. In Ethiopia, if you can attract 10% of the market, that's about 10 million people, which is a lot for a product, to succeed and become profitable. So, and not just only looking at it as Ethiopia only, but Africa as a whole. We have over 1 billion people in Africa, and whatever products we work now, like mobile penetration is at an all-time high. Phones are way much cheaper than they used to be, meaning more smartphone users. So there's a lot of ways that we can be creative and have to make sure we have a competitive advantage, to the Western world. Especially now, it's the fourth industrial revolution. It's all about technology, and we still have time to catch up. They're not as far as ahead of us. So I think us training our people and making sure we invest in our people, half of the people are 18 years old out of 100 million population. So we need to make sure we stay competitive in the global market.
That's amazing. Yeah, go ahead. I have one more question for him, and then after that, I'm going to open it to the audience. So get your questions ready. My last question for you is, if you could say one thing to people that are planning on starting a business or are starting businesses, what would be one advice you'd give them?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things I would say. I think one of the important things I want to mention, and I also personally went through, was the whole idea of you can't do it. As I said earlier, when I started Network to Net Worth, a lot of people are saying, what's the point? Are you making money? You already have the network. Why are you expanding the network? But one of the things is that I tell everybody, share your networks, Don't close doors on people. At the end of the day, for me, for example, like in our sector specific, when I think of venture capital, so just to mention, I'll probably say we're the first local Ethiopian venture capital firm run by locals, for locals. So like for us, it's all about making sure that we provide a platform for these young people. So anybody in this room can be the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Steve Jobs, But the issue is lack of financing. Banks don't give loans to small like startups, even if they do, it's at extremely high bank rates. And if you talk to older investors, I mean, the average CEO age is like 65 years old in this country. So when you try to talk to them about technology, it's like a no-go, I tried a lot. But so for us, it's just about technology needs to be adapted more. And I think it's important for us to be aware of how important it is to build a knowledge-based economy instead of just having people working at factories and doing jobs. I mean, we see it with China. China used to be the #1 manufacturing hub, but now people are leaving China to come to Ethiopia, And that's because we have cheaper labor. And then again, after Ethiopia, probably will be Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea. So for us, it's like if we build a knowledge-based economy, a tech-based economy, we make sure that even if people leave, we stay at the forefront and are able to create value, because it's all about creating value. And at the end of the day, I think we should be uploaders and not downloaders, Where how many Ethiopian apps do you have? I remember last time we were at Mella, Bethlehem asked the question, and people were like, I have personally have a ride and delivery at these, So we definitely have to make sure to have more like homegrown, tech applications being coming out. And, I was just in Nairobi, I think about 2 months ago, and what you see is that there's a lot of startups. They're way ahead of us, but all of the startup leaders are foreigners. So there's barely like almost 90% of startup founders in Kenya are foreigners. So we need to make sure we invest in homegrown talent and invest in our own people.
That's amazing. So now the panel is open to anyone who has questions from the audience. So go ahead. Yeah, I'll just repeat your question after.
Don't take it. He's my friend. It doesn't count.
I was just saying, I had lunch with Noel last week, and he was sharing with me how he started NTN with this idea of not making tremendous amount of money, but today he sits here with a committed capital of about $3 million. And I think there's something to be said for us when someone's working for the greater good and how the stars align for something inspiring to be created. So I think if you could share how you met your investor particularly and what that's meant for you, because I think that's a inspiring and a really fun story for us, I think.
All right, Sammy. Good question. It's an interesting story. Just to keep it very brief. So as I said, I used to live in New York. I actually met my investor at a dinner. I was supposed to get introduced to his friend, so not even my actual investor. So his friend was a banker, Goldman Sachs banker, and then private equity. So he's pretty much a hotshot in New York that I've been trying to get connected to, I think, for about 3 years. So one day they walked into my uncle's restaurant in New York, and my uncle literally grabbed me and put me on the table with them, and said he's gonna have dinner with you guys. So my whole attention at the beginning, to be honest, was the finance guy. I studied finance. My idea was to go into investment banking, but then I ended up connecting more with his friend. And to be really honest, his friend was in Crocs and a T-shirt. He wasn't dressed up. The Wall Street guy was in a suit, all looking sharp. And so for me, I had even no idea, to be honest, that my investor was a net worth individual. But we had a long conversation. I told him what I was passionate about. I told him what I'm currently doing, and the next thing he asked me was, how's network to net worth going to be profitable? So I told him that the idea was, as I had mentioned earlier, was we're connecting people, but we weren't charging anybody because we said this is for the community. And I had told him this whole idea about in 5-6 years after I work in corporate America, after I get the experience, I would like to start a fund. And I remember, I think he called me back about a week later saying, let's do it now, So I said, sure, why not? So I ended up coming here. And I think, just to go back a little bit, I think I made it sound very easy. I said dinner and then investment. But for me, it was like when we were speaking, all I was talking about is what I was currently working on. And I was asking him a lot. I was very curious. I was interested in knowing what he was doing. And, one of the things I always tell my friends is when you're around other people, try to have meaningful conversations, try to see how can we benefit one another? How can we bring value to one another? How can we collaborate? And so many times we miss out on opportunities like this because of the lack of communication. Especially in our culture, it's not common to say, hey, what are you doing right now? What are you working on, It's like something like, oh, no, you shouldn't be asking. But for me, that's the first thing I ask, because if we have similarities, we might be able to work together, innovate together. So I asked him a lot of questions about what he does. He asked me a lot of questions back, and we ended up clicking. And so now he's my investor and partner, my mentor, my idol, everything,
That's amazing. I think because of our time constraint, we only have time for one more question, but hopefully he'll be around to talk to you guys after. I have time for one more question. Shoot. So I think the question is, what are you looking for from the companies that you're investing in as the investor?
Are you asking what type of sectors? As a founder? So
for the sake of the cameras, let me just repeat the question. As the investor, what do you want to see from the companies for you to invest in them, right? Okay.
So I had touched upon that a little bit earlier, saying market size, product, and team. But just to elaborate further on that, I think for us it's about seeing breakthrough ideas. It shouldn't be. I always tell people, like, don't come with half-baked ideas, right? So when you come to a venture capital firm, You should be pretty sure of your product. You should believe in your product, and it should be something that's scalable. So I think scalability is something that's extremely important. You have to be able. So for us, always when we talk to entrepreneurs here, it's like we don't want them to just be thinking about Ethiopia, but we also want them to think about Africa as a whole, especially East Africa. There's a big market. So I think it's important for us to see sustainability and impact as well. So what exactly are you trying to achieve? Are you solving a major problem? So those are things that are quite important to us. And the other thing is, there's the saying. I don't remember who told me. Probably one of my mentors. Probably Anthony actually. He said to me, "What's the difference between a pig and a chicken and a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich?" So the answer is that the pig is committed. His meat is literally like all like out there, his bacon. But a chicken only gave birth to the egg, so they're just involved. So when we look at founders, we're trying to look at founders that are fully committed, really believe in the idea, and are actually able to execute and provide results.
I know this could go on all night, but sadly, because of time, we have to finish. Thank you so much for coming to share your story with us.
I appreciate it.